They came for her at dusk, their boots heavy on the cracked pavement, their eyes cold as steel. Amara Cole stood alone in the alley, her breath catching as the three officers closed in, their hands twitching toward their holsters. She was no stranger to this being cornered, being seen as less, but tonight, her protector wasn't just her courage, it was the war-trained dog at her side, Titan, whose growl rumbled like a storm about to break. Amara's heart pounded, but she held her ground. The alley was a narrow trap, flanked by crumbling brick walls and littered with the ghosts of forgotten lives, empty bottles, torn posters, a rusted bike frame. The air was thick with the scent of damp concrete and the weight of unspoken accusations. She'd been walking home from her shift at the community center, her bag slung over her shoulder, when the patrol car's lights had flared behind her. No explanation, just commands: stop. Hands where we can see them. Now, here she was, staring down men who saw her not as a woman, a teacher, a survivor, but as a threat. "Step back, ma'am," Officer Hargrove barked, his voice sharp, his hand resting on his gun. He was the tallest, broad-shouldered, with a jaw set like he'd already decided her guilt. His partners, Officers Reed and Callahan, flanked him, their eyes darting between Amara and Titan. The dog's ears were pinned back, his dark fur bristling, every muscle primed to lunge. Amara's fingers brushed his collar, a silent signal to hold steady, but she could feel his tension mirroring her own. "I'm not doing anything wrong," Amara said, her voice steady despite the tremor in her chest. "I'm just trying to get home." Hargrove's lip curled. "You match a description. Robbery suspect. Black female, mid-30s, this area. You're coming with us." Amara's stomach twisted. Match a description. Those words, vague and weaponized, had haunted her community for years. She was 32, a high school history teacher who'd spent her life proving she was more than the stereotypes they pinned on her. But here, in this alley, she was just another face to them, another box to check. "I'm not your suspect," she said, her voice rising, sharp with defiance. "You've got no reason to stop me." Reed, younger and wiry, stepped closer, his hand inching toward his taser. "Don't make this harder than it needs to be. Get that dog under control, or we will." Titan's growl deepened, a guttural warning that vibrated through the alley. Amara tightened her grip on his collar, her mind racing. She'd adopted Titan 2 years ago, a retired military dog who'd served in conflict zones, trained to protect, to react. He'd been her shield through sleepless nights, her companion through a world that too often felt hostile. Now, his amber eyes were locked on Reed, unblinking, ready. "Don't touch him," Amara said, her voice low but fierce. "He's protecting me. You're the ones escalating this." Callahan, the quiet one, finally spoke, his tone deceptively calm. "Ma'am, we're just doing our job. Step away from the dog, and let's talk." "Talk?" Amara almost laughed, bitter and hollow. Talk was never the point in moments like these. She'd seen it before. Her brother, Malik, stopped and frisked at 16-4, looking suspicious. Her neighbor, Mrs. Carter, questioned for sitting too long on her own porch. The stories piled up, each one a brick in the wall of distrust between her community and the badges now circling her. Hargrove took a step forward, his boots scraping the pavement. "Last chance. Move, or we make you move." The air crackled with tension, the kind that could snap into violence in a heartbeat. Amara's pulse thundered in her ears, but she didn't back down. She couldn't. Not when she'd spent her life fighting to be seen, to be heard. Not when Titan's loyalty was the one thing she could trust in this moment. "Titan, hold," she whispered, her voice steady despite the fear clawing at her. The dog's ears twitched, but he didn't move, his body a coiled spring. Hargrove's eyes narrowed. "You think that dog's gonna save you? We've got procedures for animals like that." The threat hung heavy, and Amara's blood ran cold. She knew what procedures meant. She'd read the stories: dogs shot, owners blamed, justice buried under paperwork. But Titan wasn't just any dog. He'd been through war zones, trained to sense danger, to protect at all costs. And right now, he saw the same threat she did. "Don't," Amara said, her voice cutting through the dusk. "You don't know what he's capable of." Reed snorted, his hand now gripping his taser. "We'll see about that." The moment stretched taut, a wire ready to snap. Amara's mind raced, calculating her options. Run, and they'd chase. Fight, and they'd whine, at least in the eyes of the law. But surrender? That wasn't in her. Not tonight. Not ever. Then, a sound broke the standoff, a sharp crack, like a bottle shattering in the distance. Titan's head snapped toward it, his growl spiking into a snarl. The officers flinched, their hands jerking to their weapons. Amara's breath caught as she saw Hargrove's fingers close around his gun, his eyes locked on Titan. "No," she shouted, stepping in front of her dog, her body a shield. "He's not attacking. You're scaring him. Control that animal." Hargrove roared, drawing his gun. The alley erupted into chaos. Titan lunged, not at the officers but to Amara's side, his training kicking in to protect her. Reed raised his taser, the red dot of its laser dancing on Titan's flank. Callahan shouted something, but the words were lost in the rush of adrenaline. Amara threw herself between Titan and the officers, her arms outstretched, her voice raw. "Stop. Just stop." For a heartbeat, time froze. The officers' weapons were raised, Titan's teeth bared, and Amara stood in the center, her chest heaving, her eyes blazing with a fire that refused to be extinguished. She was tired of being profiled, tired of being feared, tired of a world that saw her skin before her soul. But she wasn't broken. "You don't get to do this," she said, her voice trembling with fury and conviction. "You don't get to make me the villain in my own story." Hargrove's gun wavered, his jaw tight. Reed's taser stayed steady, but his eyes flicked to Callahan, uncertain. The alley was silent now, save for Titan's low growl and the distant hum of the city. Then, a new voice cut through the tension. "What the hell's going on here?" Amara turned, her heart still racing. A man stood at the mouth of the alley, his phone raised, recording. He was older, maybe 50, with graying hair and a grocery bag dangling from one hand. His name was Mr. Ellis, a retired bus driver who lived 2 blocks over. Amara knew him from the community center, where he volunteered on weekends. "Put the weapons down." Mr. Ellis shouted, his voice firm but shaking with anger. "You're being recorded. This ain't right, and you know it." Hargrove's face darkened, but he didn't lower his gun. "This doesn't concern you, sir. Step back. It concerns all of us." Mr. Ellis snapped, stepping closer, his phone steady. "You're harassing this woman for no reason. I've been watching, and she's done nothing wrong." Amara's chest tightened, a mix of relief and fear. Someone was seeing her, really seeing her, but the danger wasn't over. Titan pressed against her leg, his warmth grounding her as the officers exchanged glances. Callahan spoke first, his voice low. "Hargrove, maybe we should." "Maybe nothing," Hargrove cut him off, but his tone was less certain now. The weight of Mr. Ellis's phone, the threat of exposure, hung over them. Amara seized the moment. "You want to know who I am?" she said, her voice rising, clear and unbroken. "I'm Amara Cole. I teach kids to believe in themselves. I've got a master's degree, a family, a life. And I'm not your suspect. You stopped me because of how I look, and that's the truth you don't want on that video." The words hit like a punch, raw and unfiltered. Reed's taser lowered slightly, his eyes flickering with something guilt, maybe, or doubt. Callahan shifted, his hand dropping from his holster. Hargrove, though, held his ground, his gun still raised, his pride warring with the reality of the moment. "Lower the weapon," Mr. Ellis said, his voice steady now. Do it, or this goes viral by morning. The standoff stretched on, seconds feeling like hours. Amara's legs trembled, but she stood tall, Titan at her side, her protector, her strength. She thought of her students, of the kids she'd taught to stand up, to speak out. She thought of her brother, her mother, her community, the people who'd carried her through a world that too often tried to break her. And then, slowly, Hargrove lowered his gun. Hargrove's gun lowered, but the tension in the alley didn't break. It shifted, like a storm changing course. Amara's pulse still hammered, her breath shallow, as she kept her eyes locked on the officers. Titan's growl softened, but his stance remained rigid, his loyalty unwavering. Mr. Ellis stood firm at the alley's mouth, his phone still recording, a silent witness to the truth unfolding. The city's hum pulsed faintly in the distance, a reminder that life beyond this moment continued, oblivious to the battle being fought here. "All right," Hargrove said, his voice gruff, the word forced through clenched teeth. "Let's take this down a notch." He holstered his gun, but his eyes never left Amara, still carrying that edge of suspicion, that refusal to fully back down. Reed and Callahan followed suit, their movements slow, reluctant, as if they were still weighing whether this was a victory or a defeat. Amara didn't relax. She couldn't. Not when the weight of their badges, their power, still hung heavy in the air. "You owe me an explanation," she said, her voice steady but laced with fire. "Why am I here? What's the real reason you stopped me?" Hargrove's jaw tightened, but Callahan stepped forward, his hands raised in a gesture of peace. "Ma'am, we got a call about a robbery nearby. Description was vague, but you were in the area. We're just following protocol." "Protocol?" Amara's laugh was sharp, cutting through the dusk. "Your protocol is to corner a woman walking home. To pull weapons on her and her dog. That's not protocol. That's prejudice." The word landed like a slap, and Callahan flinched. Reed looked away, his taser now clipped to his belt, his face unreadable. Hargrove, though, met her gaze, his eyes narrowing. "You don't get to lecture us, lady. We're doing our job." "Your job?" Mr. Ellis interjected, his voice rising as he stepped closer, phone still raised. "Your job is to protect, not terrorize. I've lived in this neighborhood 30 years, and I've seen this play out too many times. You picked her because she's black, and you know it." The accusation hung in the air, raw and undeniable. Amara felt a surge of gratitude for Mr. Ellis, for his courage, but also a pang of sorrow. It shouldn't take a bystander with a phone to make them listen. It shouldn't take a war-trained dog to make them hesitate. She shouldn't have to prove her humanity in an alley at dusk. Hargrove's face reddened, but he didn't respond. Instead, he turned to his partners. "Let's go. We're done here." He shot Amara one last look, a mix of frustration and something else, maybe shame, maybe defiance, before turning toward the patrol car parked at the alley's edge. Reed hesitated, his eyes flickering to Amara. "Ma'am, we didn't mean for this to." "Save it," Amara cut him off, her voice cold. "You don't get to apologize now. You made your choice when you pulled that taser." Reed's mouth opened, then closed. He nodded once, almost imperceptibly, and followed Hargrove. Callahan lingered a moment longer, his expression conflicted, but he said nothing before joining the others. The patrol car's engine roared to life, its lights casting a brief, harsh glow across the alley before it pulled away, leaving only the echo of its departure. Amara exhaled, her knees trembling as the adrenaline began to fade. Titan pressed closer, his warmth a steady anchor. She knelt beside him, her fingers sinking into his fur, and whispered, "Good boy. You did good." His tail thumped once, a small gesture that felt like a lifeline. Mr. Ellis lowered his phone, his face etched with exhaustion and anger. "You okay, Amara?" he asked, his voice softer now, the kind of gentleness that came from shared understanding. She nodded, though her chest still felt tight. "Thank you, Mr. Ellis. For stepping in. For seeing me." He shook his head, his eyes glistening. "Shouldn't have to be this way. You shouldn't need me or that dog to get home safe." Amara swallowed hard, the truth of his words settling like a stone in her gut. She stood, brushing the dirt from her knees, and glanced at the wooden signpost leaning against the wall, its chalked words, her fight, his fury, still visible in the fading light. It felt like a marker, a testament to this moment, to her survival. As they walked out of the alley together, Mr. Ellis promised to send her the video. "This needs to be seen," he said. "People need to know what happened here." Amara nodded, but her mind was already racing ahead. She thought of her students, the kids she taught to question, to challenge, to dream. She thought of her brother, Malik, now a mechanic with a family of his own, still carrying the scars of his own encounters with police. She thought of her community, bound by resilience but worn down by the constant fight to be seen as human. By the time she reached her apartment, the night had fully settled, the city's lights flickering like stars against the dark. She fed Titan, his bowl clinking softly in the quiet kitchen, and sat at her small table, her laptop open. Mr. Ellis had sent the video, along with a message, "Do what you need to do with this. I'm with you." Amara watched the footage, her stomach churning as she relived the confrontation. The officers' drawn weapons, Titan's protective stance, her own voice cutting through the fear, it was all there, raw and undeniable. She uploaded the video to X, her fingers trembling as she typed a caption, "This is what it means to walk home in my skin. This is why we fight." Within hours, the post spread, shared by friends, neighbors, strangers. Comments poured in, some filled with outrage, others with support, a few with ugly dismissals that stung but didn't surprise her. By morning, the video had reached thousands, sparking debates in community forums, on local news, even in the comments section of the police department's page. People argued about justice, about race, about power. Some called her a hero, others called her a troublemaker. But Amara didn't care about the labels. She cared about the truth. The next day, she got a call from a local activist group, the Unity Coalition. They'd seen the video and wanted to meet. "We're organizing a town hall," the woman on the phone said, her voice warm but urgent. "We want you to speak. Your story matters." Amara hesitated. She wasn't a public speaker, wasn't someone who sought the spotlight. But she thought of her students, of the kids who looked up to her, who needed to see that standing up wasn't just possible, it was necessary. "I'll do it," she said finally, her voice firm. The town hall was held a week later in the community center where Amara worked. The room was packed, neighbors, activists, even a few reporters. Titan sat at her feet, his presence a quiet strength as she took the microphone. She told her story, not just the alley but the years before its stops, the stairs, the assumptions that had shaped her life. She spoke of Titan, her protector, who'd been trained to see threats where others saw only routine. And she spoke of hope, of a world where no one had to fear walking home. The crowd listened, some nodding, some wiping tears. A few police officers stood at the back, their faces unreadable, sent by the department to monitor. Amara didn't shy away from them. "This isn't about hating police," she said, her voice steady. "It's about accountability. It's about a system that needs to change so people like me aren't seen as threats just for existing." When she finished, the room erupted in applause, but Amara felt no triumph, only resolve. The Unity Coalition connected her with a lawyer, who filed a formal complaint against the officers. The department issued a statement, promising an investigation, but Amara knew better than to trust promises alone. She kept speaking, kept teaching, kept showing up, with Titan always at her side. Months later, the investigation concluded. Hargrove was suspended for 2 weeks, a slap on the wrist that angered many in the community. But Reed and Callahan came forward, meeting with Amara privately. Reed, his voice low, admitted he'd been wrong. "I didn't see you," he said. Not really. I'm trying to do better. Callahan nodded, his silence heavy with regret. It wasn't enough, not yet, but it was a start. Amara's video continued to circulate, sparking conversations in homes, schools, and precincts. Her students began writing essays about justice, about courage. Malik organized a neighborhood watch, not to police but to protect. And Titan, ever loyal, became a symbol in the community, a reminder that strength could come from unexpected places. In the end, Amara didn't just survive the alley, she changed it. She changed the way her community saw itself, the way it demanded to be seen. And though the scars of that night remained, so did her hope, fierce and unyielding, that one day, no one would have to fight to be free. What's right, what's wrong, what's just? Share your thoughts, because this story isn't just Amara's, it's ours.